Okay, this is Dr. Stephen Criswell. We are at USC Lancaster's Native American Studies Center. It is Monday, March 21st, 2022, and we are talking with members of the Sumter tribe of the Cheraw, and I'll ask you folks to introduce yourselves.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here once again with Chris and his staff here today. I've been here several times, and either at some dinners or Indian affairs, but it's so very nice to be here today. First of all, we're from the Sumter tribe of Cheraw Indians, and these are two of the council members here. This is Tammy here on my left, and this is Courtney Tice here on my right. She, as far as I know, is the youngest, one of the youngest council members of all the tribes of South Carolina. But our story, it's a long story, and it was complicated of how we got going. When I was a young boy, I can remember that we always would ask our elders, grandparents, who are we? And a lot of people call us the mysterious people, and they said the mysterious Turk people. And the Benenhales, they were the main ones that were of the community at that particular time. But the story goes that the Joseph Benenhale, he came aboard a pirate ship. There's different views and different theories of where he originated. And some say from Morocco, and some people say from Turkey, but some kind of way he landed here in a small town of Sumter, South Carolina. And the book that was written said that Joseph Benenhale I and Scott the Bugler were General Sumter's two of his main scouts at that particular time. So we started to question it then. So how can someone that's way off from another country be a scout in the land that he's never seen? But the book says that he was, those two were the favorite scouts of General Sumter that fought in the war, which he lived in Sumter also. And so we started checking around, and we knew the Benenhales, they were called the Turk, but then the Hoods and Rays and the Inamarian started, and we kept on asking the question, who are we? I mean, why come we cannot speak the language of the Turkish country, and we don't know one word of it? It was a mystery to us. And so I have a brother that he had moved away, and he had time to read, and he said, we are Native American Indians. And so he said, someone out there, of our people needs to start checking into that. And so the adventure started. It started off with one of my sisters and I. We looked around locally in town, and we never could find it. We fell flat on our face. We got Ancestry.com, tried that, and we could only go so far, fell on our face. And so they dropped everything in my lap. And so after that, in my mind, I was told to start going to North Carolina. And so at that particular time, I did go to North Carolina, and I was, someone told me to stop in a little store in Pembroke, North Carolina. It's called Indian Colony Trading Store. And his name was Chris Harden. He was Tuscarora Indian. And I'd never seen him before, never talked to him. And I told him what I was doing. We were seeking recognition, and we were seeking Aaron Oxendine, because I found him on the 1810 census in a book, census book in Sumter, South Carolina. And so we were looking for him. And he said, well, you know, I married an Oxendine girl, and I've been doing her genealogy for 25 years. I said, do you mind, Chris, if I take a look at that? And he said, sure. And so he went, they lived in a two-story store, they lived there, and this is the original copy that he handed me here. And on the very first page, when I started to look down, there was the man that I was looking for, Charles Oxendine, It shows him in South Carolina, as I saw in the book, in 1810. And it even shows who his father was. He didn't show his mother, but he married one of to the Scott women. He was married to Jane Scott of Scott the Bugle. So my great-great-grandmother, her name was Sarah Scott. And so they came to Sumter. They left North Carolina, and they had 11 children, according to the census. And then they saw the community there that they could be like anyone else. They had the rights that everybody else had of buying a home or voting. But before that, there was an issue about that. The story tells about the book when the first Joseph Benton Haley, this was in the early 1800s or late 1700s, they don't know exact year, that he was in the courtroom and the people were debating if he was legitimate to be able to vote. Was he white or what was it? And so someone sent word to General Sumter and told him what was going on. And so he quickly rushed up there, the book says, and that he goes up and stands up and he goes there and takes his whole spill off. He walks up to where the judge is, put it on the desk, and he walks over, the book says, and shakes hands with the first Joseph Benton Haley. And he asked the judge, he said, does that make a difference? Is that enough? And the judge said, that's enough for me. Because back then, you never shook hands with an African American. That was just the way it was back in the little town of Sumter. You know, there were a lot of prejudiced people there, and that's why a lot of people moved away from Sumter. It was small, and there was a lot of prejudiced people there. So my great-great-grandfather, Aaron, here, he came through here, and he married one of the Scott daughters, and he saw all this. They had rights, because as I was reading in the history books also, it tells that an Indian, if you were Indian, you couldn't vote until somewhere around 1923. You could own a home. You couldn't do any of that. And so he saw and looked at this Joseph Benton Haley and these people that lived in something called the Turkish community. And when he had 11 kids total, and when he did that, they started intermingling and intermarrying with each other. These two here are raised, they married right into, along with Aaron Oxendine. So they got there, so it made everyone to be called the Turkish community. But the older people didn't want to challenge that. But as time went by and some of the next generation came along and computers came along, they had education, they started to do the research, and they found out, as I did, the whole story. Now, there's been many books wrote about the mysterious people. And then Wes White, he came along, he was hired by the Smithsonian, and he was hired to come write an article about the mysterious people called the Turkish community in South Carolina. And I went to the archives that particular day. Another cousin of mine, Claudia Gainey, we did our research in Columbia, and we went to sign in, and there Wes White's name was on that book. And we said, there's Wes White, he's the one that wrote the book about the mysterious people 25 years ago, 50 years. And so we went in there and we met Wes White, and we asked him about that. And he said, yes, I sure did, I wrote every word of it. He said, as a matter of fact, he said, I never did go to Sumter to do any of my research. I did it right here in Columbia on the agriculture census records. He gave great detail and about when the census man would go from house to house, he would write on the paper and the application, it'd tell how many cows they had, how many bales of cotton, how many bushels of peas they may have had. But he went into great detail about what they had, and it showed who lived next door to them. And so it had a pattern there when we got looking. He said, you two are the first two of the community that I ever seen even. I never did notice them. And so when we talked to him, he had wrote one article and left it in, this particular man wrote it, and West White put it in the archives in Sumter, and we found it about what he did, his research. And we came upon a part that was scribbled out, it was blacked out. And we wondered what that was. And so we found out that that particular article was sent to Washington, D.C., to the Smithsonian. And so we were anxious to find out what that was blacked out about that he wrote. And I called Washington, and I said, do you have the article by West White of the mysterious people of the Turkish community in Sumter, South Carolina? He said, they said, I sure do. They said, I said, it's 102 pages. And he said, it's $52. I said, is any of it blacked out? And he said, none at all. And I said, send it to me right away. And so they sent it, and I was anxious, real anxious, to compare that article and that paper with the one that was blacked out to the one from the Smithsonian. And when I put the two beside each other, the part that was blacked out was the part about the Native American Indians. I mean, he came across the Oxendines. He said the only Oxendine that I know of is from Pembroke, North Carolina, of the Lumbee tribe Indians. And he said a gentleman called him and said that he didn't want that part in there, it might cause conflict in the family, and he was going to black it out. And so West told him, said, well, you do whatever you got to do. He said, I would send what I wrote up to Washington. And so he did. And so that put us to wondering right then, and to go to do the research, because the part that he wrote in there, he made a footnote saying about the Native American Indian part.